You've been here before. A long, silent hallway stretching into nothingness. A deserted city square bathed in the sickly glow of neon lights. A decrepit building that once thrummed with life, now abandoned. Spaces that exist on the edge of reality, lingering at the precipice of the familiar and the unknown. These are what we call liminal spaces. Let's take a step back for a moment and talk about what liminal spaces really are. At its core, the word liminal comes from the Latin word limen, which means threshold, and that's exactly what a liminal space is, a transitional in-between area that's neither here nor there. Picture the waiting room at a doctor's office, an empty hallway in a school after hours, or an abandoned playground at dawn. These are all real-world examples of liminal spaces, places caught in the middle of a transition, frozen in a moment that feels like a pause button has been hit. In the realm of video games, these liminal spaces become powerful tools for storytelling and world building. Think of them as the empty moments or locations that a game fills with anticipation. These spaces can create a sensation of suspense, of being on the edge of something, which can heighten the emotional intensity of the game. By creating a sense of being neither here nor there, these games make us more emotionally invested. We're not just passively absorbing the story, we're feeling it, living it. And it's not just about suspense or dread. Liminal spaces in video games can evoke a range of emotions, from loneliness and unease to curiosity and even tranquility. So next time you find yourself in an eerily quiet virtual corridor or a deserted alien landscape, remember, you're not just in a game. You're in a liminal space, a place of transition that's full of emotional potential. And that's what makes these spaces such an incredible tool for game developers and an unforgettable experience for players. Also, really quick before we get into the video, I gotta shout a quick praise to God for giving me this YouTube channel and this platform. And if you like my videos or just videos on liminal spaces or weirdcore or the backrooms, please be sure to subscribe so that you can see more of my videos. Yeah, glory to Jesus, and anyways, let's get into the video. Portal and Portal 2 are quite the showstoppers in the world of video gaming. Both games are brainchildren of Valve, the trailblazing creators that also gave us the legendary Half-Life series. Their innovation and commitment to compelling narratives has given us an unforgettable journey with the Portal series. Now, let's delve into the central premise. Portal catapults you into a curious mix of a puzzle platformer and a first-person shooter. Yet, it's not your usual run-and-gun game or just about maneuvering blocks. No, it's about bending the fabric of space itself. With a special gun that creates interspatial portals, you navigate a complex labyrinth that is the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. And that's where you meet our protagonist, Shell. She's an involuntary test subject, caught up in this peculiar world of science, guided, or perhaps more accurately taunted, by GLaDOS, an AI with an unsettling cheerful demeanor and a penchant for deadly tests.
Congratulations. The test is now over. All Aperture technologies remain safely operational up to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Goodbye.
This fascinating dynamic between Shell and GLaDOS forms the backbone of the series, driving the narrative in an excitingly eerie dance of power, wit, and survival. Now, let's explore the fascinating setting where this drama unfolds, the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. The moment Shell wakes up in the first Portal game, you are thrust into an environment that is a paradox in itself. It is clinical, sterile, full of advanced tech, yet there's a foreboding sense of abandonment and decay. This vast, seemingly endless facility is filled with stark, white testing chambers that twist and turn, each one a puzzle waiting to be solved. But these aren't just any rooms. These are quintessential examples of liminal spaces in gaming. Each chamber is a pause between the events of the game, a place where you're caught in a loop of action, reflection, and anticipation for what comes next. They exist in between the safety of completion and the uncertainty of the unknown, the past and the future, creating a sense of suspense and anticipation that can almost be tangible. It's in these spaces where you truly test your problem-solving skills, bending the laws of physics to navigate through the eerie silence and towards the next part of the narrative. And then there are the behind-the-scenes areas, the pipes and platforms behind the pristine white walls of the testing chambers. These areas amplify the feeling of being in a transitional space, giving you a peek behind the curtain and serving as a stark contrast to the sterile test rooms. They hint at a world beyond the confines of your immediate environment, furthering the narrative and giving a sense of scale to the Aperture Science facility. They remind you that you're trapped in this labyrinth, providing a deeper sense of urgency and tension. They're a vital part of the disorienting and disconcerting atmosphere that is so crucial to the game's charm. The liminal spaces in Portal play a vital role in the game's narrative and mechanics. Let's first focus on the test chambers. As transitional spaces, they bridge the gap between narrative segments, acting as the game's puzzle-based heartbeat. Each chamber stands as a challenge, a question waiting to be answered, its sterility amplifying the sense of isolation and tension. And when you finally solve the puzzle, there's a moment of triumph, quickly replaced by the uncertainty of what comes next. The test chambers effectively keep you teetering between comfort and unease, creating a rhythmic tension that's both unsettling and addictive. But the sense of liminality isn't confined to the test chambers alone. The behind-the-scenes areas, those cold industrial corridors and abandoned offices, add a whole new layer to the game's narrative. They reveal the bones beneath Aperture's polished facade, making the player aware of the scale and complexity of the facility. The stark contrast between these areas and the clinical test chambers furthers the sense of unease and the feeling that something's not quite right. It's like stepping backstage during a play, seeing the wires and scaffolding, amplifying the surreal nature of Shell's ordeal. And it's precisely this combination of transitional spaces that elicits a unique emotional response from players. The disorientation, anticipation, the eerie sense of being neither here nor there, all serve to draw players deeper into the game. It turns the game into more than just a series of puzzles. It's an experience, an emotional journey. The liminal spaces in Portal make players feel a part of Shell's plight, experiencing her isolation, her determination, her resilience, adding a richness to the gameplay that lingers long after the console has been turned off. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at the sequel, Portal 2. This game builds upon the original's strong foundation and adds layers of complexity both in terms of gameplay mechanics and the use of liminal spaces. The most significant change in Portal 2 is the introduction of new game mechanics, such as different types of gels that alter physics, allowing for more complex and challenging puzzles. But it's not just the gameplay that's evolved. The setting of Aperture Science Laboratory has also expanded, taking us deeper into its history and vastness. A striking addition is the exploration of the old Aperture Science areas, deep beneath the modern facility. These spaces, tinged with a patina of age and rust, are an eerie echo of the past. They're liminal spaces on a larger scale, serving as a transition not just between rooms or puzzles, but between different eras of the laboratory's existence. Exploring these dilapidated, forgotten sectors, you feel the weight of time, the shift from the old to the new. These areas stand in stark contrast to the sterile modern chambers, underscoring the company's dark past and the progression of its questionable scientific endeavors. These new spaces don't just add visual variety, they create a sense of unease and disorientation that deepens the feeling of liminality. As you navigate from the clean lines of the modern facility to the rusted gears of the old ones, you can feel a transition happening, a journey through space and time. The old Aperture areas build on and amplify the transitional and suspenseful nature of the game, keeping players constantly on their toes and engaged in the game's rich narrative tapestry. They remind us that in Portal, you're not just in a place, but in a state of transition, perpetually moving towards an uncertain future. So now let's shift gears a bit and dive into something different, but equally as fascinating. Garry's Mod, or Gmod as it's more commonly known. Developed by the mastermind Gary Newman, Gmod is like the Wild West of the gaming world. It's a sandbox game, built on Valve's Source Engine, which means it doesn't restrict you to a linear storyline or set goals. It's more like a playground where you're given a bunch of toys and you're free to do whatever you want with them. Create, destroy, play, experiment. You're only limited by your own imagination. Gmod's environments are your canvas and the game mechanics are your paintbrush. You can manipulate the game's objects and characters in any way you want, whether that means building complex contraptions, reenacting scenes from your favorite movies, or just seeing what happens when you launch a refrigerator into the sky with a rocket launcher. The beauty of Gmod lies in this open-endedness. It's not just about playing a game, but about shaping your own unique experiences within it. And the thing about Gmod is that it's not just the game developers who are adding to the mix, it's the players themselves. The game boasts an extensive modding community, where creative players from all around the world create and share their own maps, models, and modes. This adds another layer of versatility and creativity to the game, as you get to play in worlds created by other players, and perhaps even share some of your own. This collaborative and creative aspect of Gmod has made it more than just a game. It's a vibrant, ever-evolving community that is constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible in a video game environment. So while Gmod might not have the traditional liminal spaces we've been talking about, it creates a whole new category of them, the liminal spaces of the imagination. And here is where Gmod truly shines as a playground of creativity. It's where players can become architects of their very own liminal spaces. With an entire sandbox at their disposal, players can construct and deconstruct environments, creating settings that perfectly encapsulate the essence of the in-between. Dimly lit rooms or corridors cast in an eerie glow can amplify the sense of unease, while a distant echo or an unplaceable sound can enhance the sense of being somewhere you're not supposed to be. The game's sandbox nature doesn't stop there. With Gmod, you can take assets from other games, mix them up, and create an entirely new, unique environment. Imagine walking through the familiar cities of Half-Life, but they're eerily deserted, or the usually bustling towers of Counter-Strike are now quiet and shadowy. Gmod even allows you to bend the very laws of physics, bringing a new level of disorientation to your liminal spaces. You could create a room where gravity works sideways, or a space where time seems to slow down or speed up at random. In essence, Gmod provides the perfect canvas for the creation of liminal spaces, allowing players to embody the concept of transition, creating places that exist somewhere between the realms of the familiar and the strange, between reality and unreality. These player-created liminal spaces not only add to the game's endless possibilities, but also bring a new level of depth and engagement to the gaming experience. A fascinating aspect of Gmod is its community. The game thrives on player-created content, and there are countless examples of liminal spaces crafted by dedicated players that have captured the imagination of the Gmod community. One of the most famous maps is GM Big City. As the name suggests, it's a sprawling, deserted cityscape. You could wander the empty streets for hours, exploring the hollowed-out buildings, eerily quiet parks, and winding labyrinth-like subway systems. There's something about being alone in a place that should be bustling with life that perfectly captures that uncanny liminality. Another worth mentioning is the GM Ghost Hunt series, which combines elements of horror with liminal spaces. It's set in abandoned buildings filled with dark corners, strange sounds, and paranormal activities. The eerie silence is occasionally broken by whispers or footstep sounds coming from nowhere, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Lastly, RP_Downtown is a popular roleplay map that, when devoid of players, transforms into a surreal liminal space. Skyscrapers loom over empty streets, lights flicker in vacant apartments, and the sense of solitude is overwhelming. It's the perfect setting for a post-apocalyptic narrative or a nightmarish dreamscape. Each of these maps harnesses the power of liminal spaces to create a unique, engaging, and sometimes spine-chilling experience for players. The very essence of of these environments strikes a chord with the intrigue that we have for places that are both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, creating a sense of eeriness and wonder that's hard to shake off. Now, let's dive into another game that uses liminal spaces in a deeply engaging and innovative way. Bendy and the Ink Machine. This indie horror game, developed by Kindly Beast under the name of the game's publisher Joey Drew Studios Inc., offers a chilling journey through a forsaken animator studio, presented with an incredibly unique visual style. Bendy and the Ink Machine is steeped in a nostalgic, eerie aesthetic that echoes the classic animation style of the early 20th century. Its sepia-toned visuals and hand-drawn characters harken back to the era of vintage Disney and Fleischer Studios, making it stand apart from its contemporaries. As for the narrative, the game draws you in as Henry, a retired animator, who revisits his old workplace, Joey Drew Studios, after receiving an invitation from his former boss, Joey Drew himself. However, the once bustling animation studio is now a derelict shell of its former self, oozing with mystery, suspense, and a creeping, inky menace. The once familiar workplace has turned alien, uncanny, and dangerous, with living sketches and ink-blot monsters lurking around every corner, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. The setting of Bendy and the Ink Machine plays a crucial role in shaping its horror aesthetics, with the abandoned Joey Drew Studios being the primary backdrop of the game. This once lively, creative space has been transformed into a sprawling, ink-drenched maze, fraught with an uncanny sense of dread. Each corner of the studio, once filled with life, laughter, and creativity, has now become a liminal space, somewhere between reality and the eerie world of the ink. Take, for instance, the sprawling labyrinth hallways. These passages, usually bustling with artists, are now eerily silent, save for the echoing drip-drip of ink. The hallways are neither entirely safe nor entirely threatening, making you feel in between, suspended in a state of anticipation and uncertainty. The winding, endless quality of these corridors furthers the sense of disorientation, as if the familiar has been turned on its head. Then there's the Ink Machine room, the beating heart of this inky nightmare. This room stands as a stark contrast to the rest of the studio, filled with an imposing, monstrous machine that churns and gurgles with dark ink. It's a space caught between the mundane and the monstrous, the known and the unknown, making you feel as if you've crossed a threshold into something deeply unsettling. And who could forget the Heavenly Toys room, a place meant for joy and innocence, now tainted with an uncanny, sinister edge. The playful figures, once a symbol of creativity and imagination, now loom large and menacing in the dim light, their smiles a grotesque parody of cheerfulness. And then, of course, there's the ink, the ever-present vicious black ink that seeps through every crevice, flooding rooms and corridors, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. The ink serves as a physical manifestation of the liminal, blurring the lines between reality and unreality, transforming the familiar into something unfamiliar. This combination of liminal spaces in Bendy and the Ink Machine gives the game its unique sense of unease and foreboding, turning the familiar into the unfamiliar, making the players feel lost in a world that's eerily distorted. These liminal spaces within Bendy and the Ink Machine play a vital role in cranking up its horror aesthetic. Imagine you're meandering through these quiet, ink-soaked hallways, constantly on edge, anticipating what might pop out from the gloom. Or when you step into the Ink Machine room, where the familiar shifts into the unknown. It's these unsettling liminal areas that keep your heart pounding, and your fingers gripping the controller just a little bit tighter. The suspense they create isn't just a side effect, it's the main event. Now, let's think about how these spaces shape the way we perceive the world of Bendy. As we've been exploring, liminal spaces exist on the edge of two states, neither here nor there, and they reflect the same sense of uncertainty and confusion back onto us. We're in a world that looks familiar, it's an animation studio after all, but feels disconcertingly out of sync with reality. This contrast guides our understanding of the narrative, underscoring the theme of an idyllic past corrupted by an insidious force. Last but not least, let's talk about the emotional punch these spaces pack. When we play video games, we want to be drawn in, right? Well, the liminal spaces in Bendy and the Ink Machine do just that. They make us feel unsettled, anxious, and yeah, a little bit scared. But that's precisely what keeps us so immersed in the game. These places resonate with us on a deep emotional level because they capture that universal human experience of feeling in between, stuck on the threshold. So while they might give us the creeps, they also make us feel strangely connected to the world of Bendy and the Ink Machine. The unique charm of Bendy and the Ink Machine really comes alive when we delve into how the game's distinctive visual style and story breathe fresh life into the concept of liminal spaces. The game takes the classic elements of horror, the foreboding sense of dread, the unexpected scares, the creepy unease, and presents them in a package that feels familiar yet entirely new. The fusion of the retro cartoon aesthetic with the raw eeriness of the ink-drenched studio creates a wholly unique sense of the liminal. It's like stepping into an old cartoon that's been wrapped and distorted into a Lovecraftian nightmare. Bendy doesn't just use liminal spaces, it reinvents them. And it's not just us players who have taken notice of Bendy's innovative take on liminal spaces. The game's creative use of these unsettling areas has rippled through the genre of horror games, influencing a new wave of developers. It showed that you could take something as wholesome as an animator studio or a plush toy workshop and turn it into a spine-tingling liminal horror experience. Bendy demonstrated that the most unassuming places can become a playground for our deepest fears, prompting us to rethink how we define safe and threatening spaces in video games. In many ways, Bendy and the Ink Machine has not only successfully used liminal spaces to its advantage, but has also reshaped how these spaces are perceived in video games. It took the concept of the in-between and turned it into an integral part of its gameplay and narrative, setting a new benchmark for how liminal spaces can be used in video game storytelling. By doing so, Bendy has left an indelible mark on the landscape of horror games, and has shown us that even in the liminal, there's always room for a little bit of innovation. A lot of you will laugh, but the next game I want to talk about is Undertale. Birthed from the creative mind of Toby Fox, Undertale turned traditional RPGs on their head. Rather than focusing on battles and level ups, it prioritizes conversation, empathy, and understanding. You're handed the power to navigate through conflicts without resorting to violence, an unusual feature that provides a refreshing departure from standard RPG norms. In Undertale, you step into the shoes of a human child who has stumbled into a subterranean world populated by monsters. Each character you meet along the way, from the motherly Toriel to the skeleton brothers Sans and Papyrus, is complex, multidimensional, and memorable. They add depth and richness to your journey as they help unfold a narrative that is both whimsical and deeply moving. And now we descend into the heart of Undertale, the underground, a sprawling world beneath the Earth's surface, home to all manner of monsters. It is in itself a liminal space, a place caught between the familiar human world and the unexplored depths below. The underground isn't just a simple habitat, it's a realm of transition and transformation, where our human protagonist and the monsters they meet grapple with change, acceptance, and growth. There are specific areas within the underground that embody the essence of liminality even more strikingly. Take, for instance, the waterfall area. This is no ordinary picturesque water feature. It is a zone of eerie serenity, veiled in blues and purples. A place where the line between the natural world and the monster's habitation is blurred. As you navigate through the echoing chambers and flickering shadows, the game uses this liminal space to deepen the narrative, threading in new characters, histories, and surprises that enhance your journey. Another stark example is the True Lab found late in the game. This location, filled with unsettling echoes of past experiments, provides an unexpected deviation from the rest of the underground. It's a dilapidated space stuck between its past as a functioning laboratory and its present abandonment, only inhabited by the remnants of its forgotten creations. The True Lab elevates the uncanny, reminding us of the unsettling side of liminality. Throughout Undertale, the movement between zones, from the homely ruins to the mechanized core, continually reinforces the sensation of traversing through liminal spaces. Each shift in scenery, music, and tone underscores the journey of transformation, pushing both the protagonist and the player into new stages of understanding and empathy. It is through these changes, in and out of different zones, that the game propels you forward, ensuring that neither you nor the world around you remains static. The liminal spaces in Undertale are more than just distinctive landscapes. They're intricate components of a vast narrative tapestry, each thread underscoring themes that permeate the entire game. They're places of isolation, emphasizing the protagonist's journey as a lone human in a world of monsters. When you're traveling the waterfall's glistening caverns or the dim corridors of the True Lab, you feel the sense of solitary exploration, like you're teetering on the edge of known and unknown realms. These spaces also embody ambiguity. As you delve deeper into the underground, you encounter a narrative that is anything but black and white. Each liminal space unfurls a new layer of the story, revealing the complex and often contradictory aspects of the characters and their history. These locations blur the line between friend and foe, past and present, dream and reality. The uncertainty within these liminal spaces mirrors the moral ambiguity of the game's narrative, pushing players to question, reflect, and decide. Furthermore, the concept of duality is a recurring theme throughout the game. This idea is reflected in the liminal spaces, where two contrasting elements coexist. The surface and the underground, hope and despair, love and fear. These dichotomies are embedded in the game's liminal spaces, contributing to a profound emotional resonance. These transitional spaces also foster deep emotional connections for the players. As you navigate through the game's beautifully designed liminal spaces, your feelings oscillate between awe, melancholy, fear, and hope. The game brilliantly uses these settings to strike emotional chords, reinforcing the narrative's emotional beats and making each revelation more impactful. And finally, these liminal spaces serve to enhance player immersion. As you move from one zone to another, the transformation of the landscape reflects your progression in the game, deepening your engagement. These spaces, in their variety and originality, help to carve out Undertale's unique identity, distinguishing it from other RPGs and cementing its place as a trailblazer in the realm of video game storytelling. Through its brilliant utilization of liminal spaces, Undertale continues to captivate players, offering a gaming experience that's as immersive as it is unforgettable. Undertale presents a truly unique perspective on the concept of liminal spaces in video games, both in terms of its innovative mechanics and its heartwarming, sometimes heartbreaking narrative. One could argue that the game itself, as a whole, represents a liminal space in the realm of RPGs, straddling the line between the traditional expectations of the genre and a daring, innovative approach that flips these expectations on their heads. The innovative mechanics of Undertale interweave seamlessly with its liminal spaces. These aren't just transition points or haunting locations, but crucial elements of gameplay and storytelling. Toby Fox turned these spaces into puzzle-laden zones where the player's choices directly impact the world's reaction to them. This adds a dynamic level of interaction that keeps players engaged and underscores the transitional nature of these spaces, making them more than just static pass-through environments. Additionally, the emotional depth that these liminal spaces bring to Undertale cannot be overstated. They serve as stages for some of the game's most poignant moments and challenging moral dilemmas, enhancing player immersion. The way they help build and deliver the game's narrative was a relatively fresh concept at the time of its release, and its impact on the gaming industry was significant. This unique usage of liminal spaces didn't just make Undertale a cult classic, it also left a lasting influence on RPGs and indie games. Other developers saw how effectively Undertale utilized these spaces for gameplay and emotional resonance, leading them to explore similar concepts in their own titles. In games like Hollow Knight and Night in the Woods, we can see echoes of Undertale's masterful use of liminal spaces, creating deeply atmospheric experiences filled with mystery, tension, and emotion. From the touching narrative and moral choices of Undertale, we shift gears into the eerie, jump scare-filled world of Five Nights at Freddy's, or as fans affectionately call it, FNAF. Now, imagine this. You're the new night security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a once bustling family pizzeria fallen into disrepair. It might sound like a mundane job until you learn that you're not alone. The restaurant's animatronic mascots have a terrifying habit of roaming the halls after dark. The game, which was masterminded by the enigmatic developer Scott Cawthon, took the internet by storm when it was released back in 2014. Its unique gameplay and chilling atmosphere were unlike anything gamers had seen at the time, turning FNAF into a sensation virtually overnight. What sets Five Nights at Freddy's apart from other horror games is its core gameplay loop. As the security guard, you sit in a cramped security office, with only a set of security cameras and a couple quickly depleting power-operated doors between you and the animatronics. The challenge lies in carefully managing those resources while keeping an eye on the lurking dangers. This game of cat and mouse keeps players on edge, delivering a thrilling and terrifying experience with every passing in-game hour. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Five Nights at Freddy's is its use of confined haunted space, which fits right into our discussion of liminal spaces. Unlike the expansive worlds of Undertale or the ever-changing test chambers of Portal, FNAF traps you in a single location, turning the pizzeria into a nightmarish liminal space where safety is always just out of reach. But we'll get more into that later. For now, sit tight and keep those doors closed. You wouldn't want any uninvited guests, would you? In the realms of Five Nights at Freddy's, the concepts of liminal spaces are taken to chilling new heights. The game is a masterclass in generating suspense and fear by exploiting the uncanny nature of in-between spaces. Your main hub in the game, the security office, is the primary liminal space we'll explore. This tiny room serves as a paradoxical sanctuary, a place that's supposed to keep you safe from the menacing animatronics, and yet is also a space of vulnerability. While you are somewhat shielded, you have limited power to keep the office secure, and you're also cut off from the outside world with no way out until dawn. It's a space between safety and danger, a limbo where your fate hangs in the balance, increasing your sense of dread with every passing second. But the office isn't the only liminal space in Five Nights at Freddy's. The pizzeria's various rooms and hallways, observed through grainy security cameras, are also integral to the game's eerie atmosphere. These places are a familiar sight during the day, filled with joy and laughter, but at night, they transform into something entirely different. Eerie, desolate areas that harbor potential threats. As the player, you watch these spaces constantly anticipating a jump scare. They represent the threshold between knowing you're safe for now and the fear of what's coming next, creating an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. The limited visibility and control over these spaces further amplify the game's fear factor. The grainy, flickering footage, the limited view of each camera, and the inability to see everything at once keeps you in a perpetual state of anxiety. You're always watching, stuck between one heartbeat and the next, unsure if you're about to breathe a sigh of relief or scream in terror. This expert use of liminal spaces is a significant part of what has kept players coming back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, game after game, year after year. These liminal spaces in Five Nights at Freddy's aren't merely background details or set pieces. They're crucial components that build an atmosphere thick with tension and horror. Their role goes beyond aesthetics. They actively shape the player's experiences and emotions in profound ways. Being confined within the liminal space of the office drastically intensifies the game's tension. In this claustrophobic room, you're both the observer and the prey. As you frantically switch between camera feeds, every moment of silence, every room or hallway becomes a source of stress. This feeling is deepened by the fact that you're confined to this space and can't physically intervene or escape from the threats lurking inside. You're left to anxiously watch as your sanctuary gradually becomes your trap. The developers of Five Nights at Freddy's also masterfully employ audio cues within these liminal spaces to heighten fear and anxiety. The creepy, echoing footsteps that indicate an animatronic is close by, the jarring sound of a door being slammed shut, or the sudden silence when a character is no longer where they should be. Each of these sounds puts you on high alert, increasing the fear factor as they remind you of the danger that's creeping ever closer. And let's not forget the game's ingenious use of limited resources, particularly power. Your ability to keep the lights on, close the doors, or monitor the security cameras all rely on power, and it is in very short supply. This limitation effectively constrains your control over these liminal spaces, creating a desperate balancing act between preserving power and protecting yourself. The dwindling power supply adds another layer of dread and urgency to the gameplay. You're caught in a nerve-wracking dance on the edge of safety and vulnerability, making the game's liminal spaces even more unnerving. The Five Nights at Freddy's universe doesn't stop with the first game. It's a sprawling series with numerous sequels and spin-offs, each introducing their own unique liminal spaces while maintaining the franchise's signature eerie vibe. Take, for instance, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It brings players to a new location, a redesigned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but this time there are no doors to shut. This leaves you more vulnerable, enhancing the sense of danger and insecurity. Here, the liminal space becomes even more pronounced, as the security office serves less as a sanctuary and more as a stage for impending doom. The dark, ominous party rooms and air vents observed through the cameras also serve as liminal spaces, creating a dreadful anticipation as you wait for something horrifying to emerge. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, the game takes place in a horror attraction based on the events of the previous games. The liminal spaces here are filled with relics from the past, creating a sense of unease. This time, you're not just observing the rooms through cameras, you're also manipulating the space by using audio cues to control the movement of the animatronics. This adds a layer of strategy and heightens the tension. Five Nights at Freddy's sister location takes an entirely different approach. It moves away from the static security room and requires you to navigate through different parts of the underground facility. The whole facility itself becomes a massive liminal space, with each area harboring its own threats. The spin-off game Ultimate Custom Night creates a different type of liminal space. In this endless night of horror, the game combines elements from all previous games. You can customize your experience, selecting which animatronics you'll face. It's a place between places, existing outside of the established storyline, but still echoing the unsettling ambiance of its predecessors. The later games continue to emphasize liminality and eeriness, each adding their own twists and keeping players on their toes. The series as a whole paints a picture of a world in constant flux, where safety is temporary and danger lurks around every corner. Each entry in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe explores liminal spaces in a unique way, further cementing the series' reputation for creating a deeply unsettling atmosphere that leaves players on edge. Transitioning from specific games to the broader landscape of gaming, it's important to recognize the profound impact liminal spaces have on players' experiences and emotions. As we traverse these transitional areas in games, they become more than just backdrops. They become critical elements, shaping our psychological responses. Liminal spaces can evoke an array of emotions, from suspense to anticipation, from unease to outright fear. In games like Bendy the Ink Machine or Five Nights at Freddy's, these spaces take center stage, fostering an atmosphere of relentless tension. They play with our instincts. Safety feels transient, danger feels imminent. This element of unpredictability keeps us engaged, our senses heightened as we anticipate what lurks around the corner. From a psychological standpoint, these spaces can significantly impact our spatial perception. James J. Gibson's theory of affordances in environmental psychology posits that we perceive spaces in terms of their potential for action. In video games, liminal spaces can afford uncertainty and potential threat, shaping our actions within the game. We navigate these spaces cautiously, acutely aware that they could switch from sanctuary to danger zone at any moment. Moreover, liminal spaces can distort our sense of time and progress. Games like Undertale and Portal manipulate our experience of time within these transitional areas, creating moments of pause, reflection, or tension that seem to stretch on indefinitely. This distortion can contribute to a game's narrative pacing, adding dramatic tension or giving players a respite before the next big event. On the flip side, games like Garry's Mod illustrate how liminal spaces can also serve as a canvas for player creativity, offering limitless possibilities for constructing new environments. In this sense, they afford not just uncertainty, but also opportunity and potential for invention. In essence, the use of liminal spaces in games is a powerful tool, capable of enhancing narrative depth, shaping player behavior, and evoking strong emotional responses. They represent a fascinating dimension of game design, one that continues to evolve and surprise us in new and exciting ways. Liminal spaces don't just enhance our gaming experiences, they also offer a wealth of opportunities for innovative game design and storytelling. These transitional zones can serve as compelling narrative tools, subtly weaving in elements of backstory, foreshadowing future events, or revealing character motivations. In Portal, for instance, the test chambers not only set the stage for mind-bending puzzles, but also silently narrate the dystopian tale of aperture science. These spaces are also fertile grounds for unique gameplay mechanics. For instance, Gary's mod exploits the potential of liminal spaces to the fullest, allowing players to build and manipulate their environments. This creates a meta-liminal experience where the transition is not just within the game world, but also in the gaming experience itself, from passive consumer to active creator. And we're witnessing a fascinating trend as game designers push the boundaries of the medium by innovating with liminal spaces. Games like Control take the idea of a shifting surreal space and center it as a core mechanic, while the ever-evolving landscape in No Man's Sky creates a virtually infinite number of transitional spaces for players to explore. Looking forward, the use of liminal spaces in video games seems poised for further exploration and experimentation. Some industry experts, for example, have speculated about potential developments in virtual and augmented reality games, where the blending of real and virtual spaces could create unprecedented opportunities for liminal experiences. Others see potential in the further integration of player-created liminal spaces, expanding on the groundwork laid by games like Gary's mod. As we delve deeper into the virtual world of gaming, the lines between reality and the virtual continue to blur. The feeling of familiarity coupled with the alien, the sense of being in between, manifests most strongly in liminal spaces. These spaces challenge our perception, tease our curiosity, and stir our emotions. They are not just backdrops for our adventures, but integral parts of the experiences themselves. So, where do we go from here? How can we continue to use liminal spaces to craft immersive, memorable experiences? What unexplored avenues await us, and what new stories can we tell? Imagine a future where games become increasingly responsive to our input, where every action echoes through the liminal spaces we traverse, forever changing the game world. Imagine games that adapt and evolve, where the liminal spaces are not just areas we pass through, but complex systems we interact with and influence. As we stand on the precipice of these exciting developments, one thing is clear. In the realm of video games, liminal spaces are no longer mere backgrounds. They are a powerful narrative and experiential tool that, when used effectively, can transform how we play, perceive, and ultimately experience video games. So next time you find yourself in that abandoned hallway, that shifting landscape, or that eerie, silent room, take a moment to consider, how does this space make you feel? How does it contribute to your experience? And most importantly, where will these spaces take us next? Thank you for joining me on this exploration of liminal spaces in video games. I encourage you to pay more attention to these spaces in your future gaming endeavors, and who knows, you might start seeing your favorite games in a whole new light. Have a great night, everybody. Sweet dreams.